The Secrets of Movies and TV Shows is brought to you by the Star Quest Production Network and is made possible by our many generous patrons. If you'd like to support the podcast, please visit sqpn.com/give.
You're listening to The Secrets of Movies and TV Shows. Hello and welcome to The Secrets of a League of Their Own, where we're talking about the hidden meanings and deeper layers found in the great historical baseball movie, A League of Their Own. I'm Father Cory Sticha. With me today are Shelly Kelly and Noëlle Crowe. Howdy, Shelly.
Howdy.
And howdy, Noëlle.
How are you doing, Father?
Doing well. Before we begin, I'd like to invite you to join in the discussion of this movie and our other shows on our Discord at sqpn.com/discord. So A League of Their Own is a kind of a classic baseball movie. It's become kind of classic baseball movie. It's kind of interesting because recently I was on a panel, Shelly and I were on a panel about Field of Dreams, which was a serious movie with very humorous elements. Well, this is a funny movie with very serious elements. So it's kind of nice to have, see kind of the opposite of that. But this movie that came out in 1992 that was directed by Penny Marshall, who of course became a director and has had great success as a director, but she's still known by at least a certain generation as Laverne of Laverne and Shirley. So a lot of people who are a little bit older remember her in that role. And this movie is a dramatized story of an actual historical organization, the All-American Girls Professional Baseball League. Now, Noëlle, as our resident historian with the American Catholic History podcast, can you tell us about the AAGPBL?
It's such a long acronym, isn't it? And, I wanted to say, when you're talking about this movie of having historical significance, it actually was designated as a movie of historical significance by the Library of Congress. So,
oh, wow, great.
Yeah, so they actually, hold it up there. And it really was significant because for a long time, the All-American Professional Girls Baseball League was largely forgotten, even though there were over 600 women who played in its 10-year history. If you watch the movie, you might get the impression that this was sort of a one and done kind of thing, or very short lived, but it actually existed for 10 years. And like the movie portrays, it was established in 1943 during World War II, due to the fact that so many men had gone to the war and they weren't sure if they were going to be able to have men's professional baseball during the war. The movie shows Wrigley, and this is the son of the famous Wrigley founder, P.K. Wrigley, but they show him as sort of the originator of this idea. But it was a group of founders who actually came together to start the league, including Branch Rickey, who baseball fans might be familiar with as the one who signed Jackie Robinson, who broke the color barrier, was involved in this as well. And in the early days, the entire league was owned by this group of founders, and in the last few years, it was sort of more what we think of or understand today, where each team had individual owners, and in some ways that decentralization of the league led to its demise, because Wrigley was a master of advertisement. And I think you get that. We'll probably talk about that a little bit, I think, in the movie. He was a master of advertising. And so the league did really well due to his advertising. But when you had various owners, you had various skill level and experience at advertising, and it sort of petered out at that point, you could say. Interestingly, there was actually even another professional baseball league for girls or women that didn't do as well, because again, they didn't have that skill at advertising their product. As the movie portrays, there were 4 original teams, and the Rockford Peaches and the Racine Bells were 2 of those original teams. The other 2 were the South Bend Blue Sox and the Kenosha Comets. So those four, the uniforms that they show in the movie were actually the type of uniforms that the women wore when they played baseball, and in part, Wrigley's wife helped in part to design those
Mm.
uniforms. Um, some of the women who uh, played for the league said basically they wanted us to play like men and conduct ourselves or look like women. And so there were rules that they had to learn etiquette, which we see in the movie. They had to wear lipstick. They couldn't smoke and drink, and all of those kinds of things. They wanted to have they wanted them to be portrayed, seen out in public as ladies. Um, and it's interesting talking about like the etiquette classes that you see in the movie, because a lot of the women who came to play were from farms, like the sisters were, right? They came from farms or small towns where they were learning, and so they didn't necessarily have all of that polish, and so that was provided for them. And A couple other points. One interesting thing that I thought of about when I was looking at it, the uniforms that they showed, those, like I said, those were similar to the uniforms that they would have worn, and including that patch that they have on the front of the uniform. Each of the city's seals was used in that patch. So you see that in the race, or both the racing and the Rockford uniforms in the movie. But Rockford Peaches, they got their name because of the color of their uniform. In
Mhm.
that time, the dye was really expensive because of needs for World War II. And so when they dyed the uniforms, they were all sort of a pastel color, because you're using a less dye, to just sort of tint the uniforms. So the Rockford uniforms ended up by being peach, and so that's how they got their name, which I thought was kind of interesting. Um, yeah, and I mean, I can get into it a little bit more later if you want, or I could talk now. But there's also some interesting history as to how this movie got made as well. And It involves a couple of Irish Catholic girls, sisters, from Vancouver, actually, and they played. They were the first sisters to play in the league, but they didn't actually play in the first year. So this is one of those divergences from from reality. They played. They came on later, but they were the first sisters who played, and one of the sisters' sons made a documentary called A League of Their Own, and actually brought that idea to Penny Marshall. And so that's sort of how it all came. So it was the Irish Catholic Callaghan sisters who were, in a sense, the responsible for the movie. Though the characters of Dottie and Kit were not actually based on the sisters, they had sort of other people that they were somewhat based on. So, yeah. So be doing the American Catholic history thing. I had to look for what's the Catholic angle to.
Yeah. Well, there's clearly a Catholic angle in this, and we'll talk about it later. There's
Yeah.
quite a few scenes in the church that are quite
Yes.
hilarious, quite humorous.
Right. Right. And one other thing to note, just the one other character, and we'll talk much more about him, but the Tom Hanks character of Jimmy Dugan is based on, in large part, based on the character or the personage of Jimmy Fox,
Right.
who was
Well, let's talk about him a little bit. We'll talk about him when we get to the character. So
yeah, we can talk about that. But what I wanted to mention about that is that we can talk more about who Jimmy Fox is and everything. But in matter of fact, the Rockford Peaches had one manager through their entire history, and he wasn't Jimmy Dugan or Jimmy Fox. His name was William or Bill Allington instead. So completely different person.
yeah. Well, I wanted to hold off on talking about more of the specifics with the history, because kind of going back to the actual league itself, that, as you said, it lasted for about 10 years. Actually, I think 11 seasons is what I saw. Yeah.
43 to 54. 54 was the last season.
Yeah. So 11 seasons.
Mhm.
And 1948 was its peak, that it actually, it had 10 teams at that point. And it had, for attendance, it had almost 1 million people attend its games, 900,000, like 910,000, which again, you know, especially since it was brought in as a stopgap, really, for the fact that men's baseball was thought to be not renewed because of or not able to play in 1943 because of the war. It did end up not being the case, but it's still that as you said, Wrigley was a master of marketing. I mean, there's a reason why it's still Wrigley Field today, and Wrigley chewing gum is still a thing. And you look into the Wrigley Corporation, and it owns a lot of stuff and has historically owned a lot of things. So he was a master of marketing, and this league that he came up with survived as long as it was being marketed. And as you said, you see that in the movie, as we'll talk about a little bit. But it is interesting that it lasted as long as it did and was as successful as it was.
And then forgotten. Like, that's kind of amazing that something that lasted that long was then just kind of completely forgotten. That had something to do with the 1950s and some of those things, which we could talk a little bit about that later. The other thing to note is that the league originally was sort of a hybrid between softball and baseball. They didn't, so the movie portrays them just playing baseball, but it moved closer to baseball and more like baseball as it went along. But originally it was underhand pitch that didn't come in to play until I think like 1946, the overhand pitch, you know. So it was sort of this hybrid thing originally. Yeah,
originally would have looked more like, if you watch women's college
softball,
fast pitch softball, would have looked more like that.
Exactly. Right.
Just the women who are playing today have better uniforms.
Right.
Probably a lot more comfortable.
And I just want to throw out that there is professional women's softball. There are, I think, 4 teams still, but it waxes and wanes just the same. So
that's interesting. I didn't even
just a little piece of trivia. When this movie came out in 1992, I have to tell you, I was in Houston at the time, and it was a really big deal down here because we had a professional baseball player on the Houston Astros named Casey Candelli, and it was his mother who played in that league. She's the one that was one of the sisters who did the documentary.
Right. Helen. Yeah, it was his older brother who did the documentary. Right.
Oh, cool.
But I just remember when it all kind of came out, how everybody was talking about how his mom had played professional baseball.
Very cool.
Exactly. Oh, cool. That's really cool that he was playing down there when you were,
when the movie came out.
Yeah, that's really neat.
So as you mentioned, the characters in the movie are fictionalized, but based on actual women who played in the league. And so probably just focus on what I think who I think are the 5 main characters of this movie. I mean, obviously there's a large cast of characters. You've got, you know, as they say, there's 64 women who are playing. You've got the managers, you've got the people who are behind the scenes. But I think the main characters are, of course, Dottie and Kit, Dottie Hinson and her sister, Kit Keller. Dottie played by Gina Davis, Kit played by Lori Petty. You got these 2 sisters who are from the Willamette Valley of Oregon, which, by the way, doesn't look like that. I've lived there. It's beautiful, but it doesn't look like Iowa cornfield.
And also settled and established by the father of Oregon, you know, a good Catholic or Catholic convert, actually.
Who's that?
You know, now I'm like blanking. His name is John McLaughlin.
Oh, there you go.
Yes, John McLaughlin, who has a statue in the Capitol building.
That's
the
right.
Father of Oregon. Right.
And the first archdiocese in the United States west of the Mississippi was Oregon City, later now Portland, Oregon. So so there's a lot of Catholic history in that area. But of course, you get these 2 sisters. They're playing on a farm league, you know, farm softball, and of course the scout played by John Lovitz. John Lovitz. I love his always love his characters. But he finds them, and of course Dottie is the one he's interested in because she's such a good catcher and hitter.
Oh yeah. She's the one I want, the one that caught the ball or hit the ball. That's not you, that's her.
Right.
Until he realizes that Kit is a pitcher, and it's like, okay, well, maybe I'll bring you with, give you the chance.
Yep. If you can get her on the train, it doesn't cost me anything. You get her on the train, I'll let you try out.
Right. Just costs us a train ticket. That's it.
Yeah,
right.
Exactly.
Right. And then what you said about it being a hybrid, if you watch the very beginning closely, you'll see that they are doing softball fast pitch. It is a fast pitch softball. And then she says, well, she didn't see her pitch. She's a really good pitcher. She pitched yesterday. And my daughter and I were watching this together. My daughter is a softball player. And she says, wait a minute, if they're doing underhand, if they're doing fast pitch softball, how does that translate to overhand pitching? Right. Is that a mistake, or did they have both and they just picked one for the movie? So thank you, Noëlle, for answering that question.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, but that was, I think they kind of briefly talked about that in the movie, if I remember correctly, something about how, or maybe it was something I read today as I was kind of reading up on this, how that was a concern of going from the underhanded fast pitch to the overhanded baseball style. And but then by going to the overhand baseball, they could also do the smaller ball, like a traditional baseball instead of a softball.
Right. And they did that gradually over a number of years. So they gradually made the ball smaller and also moved the mound back, so that it was sort of a gradual transition.
Yeah. So, and then another character is Jimmy Dugan, of course, Tom Hanks, in his one of his humorous roles, but showing, some of the serious side as well. Now you're talking about who the baseball player that he was based off of.
Yeah. So he was based off of Jimmy Fox, who played for a number of teams, including my Boston Red Sox. And it was a Hall of Fame player. Jimmy Fox and a few other professional ball players did manage some of these women's league teams. And but a big difference is that the women who played in the league all testified that Jimmy Fox was always a gentleman around them. So some of the coarser side of Jimmy Dugan really wasn't part of Jimmy Fox's persona with the women, but it definitely makes for a really good story.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
to have that.
Yeah, he kind of played a bitter character, where he was a drunk, washed up player. It wrecked his knees as a catcher, which happened quite a bit. If you study the history of baseball, catchers are notorious for having bad knees by the end of it because they spend the whole game squatting, and diving for balls and things like that. So it's understandable that their legs are shot by the time they're done playing. But he plays this drunk who kind of gets rehabilitated by the whole process.
Yeah, that's one of the themes I really like about this movie is not only is it historical and yes, it's historically, it's fictionalized and the characters aren't exact people. As we've talked about, they're based on people. But I love the way it shows the way they come together in community and the way that they persevere and the way that it becomes even a door to a new way of living and a new life for so many people. And even Jimmy Dugan can be redeemed in this movie. And we'll talk more about other pieces, but
I love, and I just love watching the scenes between him and Gina Davis as he's just coming to appreciate more and more her baseball mind. And she comes back for the last game and she only plays that one season. And I always feel so sad about that because she does have this amazing baseball mind. And it's like, what a waste to, take that back to a farm.
Yeah. Well, because he shows up and he's, sorry to use the language, but literally piss drunk. Of course, that's hilarious. I had to use that language because it fits exactly with the first scene.
They're timing him.
Yeah, exactly. And she takes over. She takes over basically as manager. She sets up the lineups. She's making the calls, and he's just kind of sitting there passed out through the first couple of games. And eventually he starts noticing that, wait a second, these girls can play. And this Dottie is actually taking the leadership and, making the calls and making the moves that need to be done.
One of the best scenes.
Yeah.
The one you're referring to right there, where I forget who's up to hit. Oh, Marla's up to hit.
Yeah.
And Dottie's telling her to do something. He's like, what are you doing? Why would you do that? And see, he has that experienced professional knowledge of strategizing there. And she's doing the best she can, and she's doing great. But he's finally noticing, like you said, and he's telling her something opposite. And poor Marla's like, step in the box, step out of the box.
She's like dancing
step out of the box. And the umpire's like, you gonna hit? She's like,
right.
I don't know.
Yeah.
And he's like,
and
he finally says to her, who's the manager of this team? And she's like, you. Now act like it.
Yeah. That is such a great. Yeah, poor Marla's dancing there at the home plate, trying to figure out what to do, and you got the dueling signs.
And of course, she gets up and she hits. Was that with the home run or the? And it's beautiful and exactly what they needed at that moment to win the game. And she looks at him like, okay, I'll give you a chance.
Yeah. And that's where he starts taking his role much more serious, and it is a great scene where, and again, it's a gradual thing. And even then he's still kind of like, I still think you can't play baseball, but
right.
But
girls can't play baseball.
Yeah.
You didn't give me players. You gave me a team. You gave me girls. These are ball players. But by the end, he's come around. Yeah.
Yep. To the point where he actually gets the chance to manage in the major leagues, men's major leagues, and he refuses it and stays with the women's.
I got a team.
Yep.
Right.
And that shows a lot of his character and how it changed.
Right. Like I said, if they had just shown him gentlemanly through the whole thing, you don't have that great story arc happening. So.
Yep.
Right. And there were two characters that he was based on, right? And both of them had drinking problems or had washed out of baseball because of their alcohol.
And then just a couple more characters. I call these two main characters because this movie revolves around them as well. Doris and May. Doris Murphy, played by Rosie O'Donnell, and May Mordabido. I can't.
All the way May.
All the way May, played by the musician and somewhat actor Madonna. I hate using her name because it's a slur on Our Lady, but that is her name. That is her given name, but that's also her stage name. So anyways, but those two, I mean, they're right from the first time you see them, they're sitting there arguing, and then they're trying to go after Kit and Dottie, and who is it? Doris throws a ball and Dottie just grabs it. It's like, oh, wait, no, they're not sticking around. You're sticking around. You two can stay.
Okay, some of them are going home.
Yeah. That's one of those quotes that gets said a lot in our house. Some of you are going home, and they're like, all right. Some of them are going home.
Yeah. Fast forwarding again to the end, but when Doris's father is there and he's talking with May, whatever. I think at the beginning you get that they're friends, that they have some history, but then you get to the end, and when they have that scene, you're like, it's actually a pretty long history. Like, I don't know if they grew up in the same place, but obviously Doris's father knows May, and so there's that closeness, which is, I just thought it was a neat little thing to, like, I don't know, bring that history in like that.
I think they explained it somewhere in there that Doris's father owned the dance hall and May was a taxi dancer. Right. And that Doris was the bouncer. And so that's how they became friends there. Right. And that's another really deep theme right there for me about how this experience gave women avenues to dream of and have a different life than the one they were born to and felt possibly for some trapped in. Definitely you see that with Kit and Dottie.
Right.
That Dottie was perfectly content where she was, but Kit yearned to be anything but, and to break away from being compared to her sister. And watching that last night with my kids, I saw so much more in that sister competitiveness that exists. I don't know if either of you have sisters or if you have that sibling competitive rivalry with anyone else in your family.
I have
but my sister
sisters.
and I, so you get it. My sister and I have been talking about that a lot growing up. I'm the older sister and she's the second, and how much she said she was always compared to me. And as the oldest, I didn't know much about it. I didn't think twice about it, but apparently it really meant something with her. So watching it with that in mind, and all the drama that happens there in the middle between the two sisters, and how Kit always thinks that Dottie's trying to hold her back. And Dottie's like, seriously, no, I'm not. To the point that Dottie is willing to sacrifice her position on the team for her sister until it backfires.
Right. Well, and that's one thing I did like is when Dottie finally got to the point of saying, don't you blame me. You got here on your own. You did this. This is, you're in this position for yourself, and don't you blame me. And, and Dottie is a classic homebody. She didn't want to leave Oregon. She didn't want to leave the farm. She was content to just wait until Bob, her husband, came back. And no, the only way that Kit could have a chance. And that actually is an interesting point, is the only reason why Kit had a chance is because Dottie went.
And she says that I got you on the train. You got yourself here. Right. But I got you on the train. You got yourself here, which I think is fair, because Kit still had to go through the whole tryout process and still had to make the roster and still had to prove herself in all the games, which obviously she did. And then she's still feeling that insecurity. Exactly. After all of that.
And this, in a way, it set them both on their path, the way they were meant to go and the way they lived the rest of their lives. In the very, very beginning, when you are first introduced to Dottie getting ready to go to the Cooperstown event where they were inducted into the Baseball Hall of Fame, her daughter, she doesn't want to go. And her daughter is like, Mom, come on, you're going to see Aunt Kit there. Oh, no, she's not going to be. And you can already tell there's still not a full reconciliation between the two of them there, that stuff has happened. So they've grown apart.
Yeah. And, you mentioned sister rivalry. Well, I had, a younger brother, and it was funny. Ours wasn't quite to this level by any stretch of imagination, but I was the older brother. And we did have one teacher where we had the same teacher. And I did hear at one point, my brother saying, I get compared to you. And she says, you're not like your older brother. It's like, I can't do anything about that, dude.
Yeah. You would think teachers would learn not to compare siblings to one another, but apparently it still happens.
Yeah, it's a temptation, I suppose.
So you've mentioned those main characters there, but I feel like we should give a couple of nods to some of the other characters too as we talk. So especially Megan Cavanaugh, who plays Marla Hooch.
Oh yeah.
She was that's one of our favorite scenes when they go to her tryout. Kind of going back on where we were on the timeline there, but they get on that train and they stop. I forget where it was, Fort Collins, I think.
Fort Collins, yep. And Fort Collins, Colorado.
It's pouring down rain and they're having a tryout inside of a gym, and there's all these boys and it's just Marla hitting. Well, she really did hit. My daughter, who when she watches this, she's like, well, she's the ball player. She's like, she can really hit, and all her hitting is her own talent. And then she switches off, and the boys all groan.
Now bat lefty. Oh,
and that one she had to learn, but she did, and
that's cool.
But again, talking about how the experience changes her life. So.
Yep.
Oh, and when he says they aren't taking her, And the girls look at her, and poor Kit just kind of blurts out, you mean you aren't taking her because she ain't pretty? And they just look at, and he's like, well, look who just joined the party or whatever. And they look at each other, and they don't even have to say a word. They both just put their suitcases down and sit down. And we're like,
yep.
And we're over here like, yeah.
Yeah. And she also, comes into her own and, gains a lot of confidence. That's the big thing, is she has like no confidence where, I love that when she walks up after hitting and her head's down and she's got the hat on and all you see is the brim of her hat. Mm-hmm. You don't see anything else. And then she lifts up the hat and all you see is hair. And then she finally looks up and it's just like, because she's not the most attractive woman, at least, the way they made her up for that scene.
Right.
And the poor dad, you could just feel his angst, and you have to put yourself back in that time. She was raised during the Great Depression. And while her father probably had this job, her mother had died and there was no one to raise her as a girl.
Mm-hmm.
And there's no television. I guess you could look at the movies, but that doesn't tell you how to do these things. So when she goes and they end up having to go to charm school, for the first time, she's around other women and she's learning how to embrace her femininity, I guess is what you say.
Right. Mm-hmm. And you can imagine, too, that they probably were poor. So she probably wasn't able to go to the movies as often maybe as others could.
But even if you go, you're looking at something glamorous on the screen that's supposed to distract you from the reality of the day. But they don't actually have instructions.
Right. So another character, a very important character for the league, is Ira Lowenstein, played by David Strayhorn. Of course, he was the president of the league. He's the one who ran the league, and he's the one who convinced Harvey, the Wrigley stand-in, to allow him to continue the league after the first year. And very, very influential and doing the advertising and getting the league running. Right,
exactly. He's the one who's coming up with all the ideas of getting the newspaper men there and telling the compelling story of, and of course getting Kit upset again when he's like, yeah, this was this great, interest story where, you wanted to come and you came with, because.
But you wouldn't come without your kid's sister.
Right, exactly. But all of those kinds of things that are building excitement about what the ladies are doing on the field.
And he was so desperate. He's like trying to tell them, y'all need to do something special. And actually, All the Way May is based on a player named Faye, and I've already misplaced her last name, but she is quoted as saying that she did a lot of those things, like which she would do the splits and catch the ball a certain way. So a lot of those, while they're not exact to the character, they are real things that did happen in the course of the league.
Yep.
Right. Faye Dancer is, I think, who you're thinking of. She was, I think, holds the record for steals in the league. Like, she was extremely fast.
Oh, wow.
And I believe the second woman inducted into the Hall of Fame. Yeah.
Very cool. Yeah. So one thing I hope to do someday is to go see the Baseball Hall of Fame, go to Cooperstown. And it sounds like they've got what they show in the movie at the end is a permanent exhibit of the women's professional baseball league. So I want to go, it'll be interesting to go see that, and of course that was based off of that.
Yeah, it's really awesome. I went once and it was really exciting to find that section and be able to walk in there and see the memorabilia and the pictures from the league. Yeah.
Yeah. That's one thing I realized actually just last night. And I'm unfortunately I was busy today. I would have tried to find some, but I haven't, I'm assuming it's out there, but I haven't seen any video. I've seen pictures from when they were playing, but I don't think I've ever seen any video of the actual women playing. There are pictures that are out there. You can go to there's actually an organization dedicated to the memory of the women's professional league, where you can see pictures of the players and everything, but be interesting to see some of the video of the actual gameplay if it happens to be out there. Of course, that was well before even, Super 8 video and things like that. This was, if there was any video out there, it was, reel to reel.
Newsreels.
Right.
newsreel type stuff.
Mhm.
Yeah. So home video didn't exactly exist back in 1943.
Now, I did find the 1987 documentary. That's available on YouTube.
Okay.
So you can actually see that. And there's a couple of different books. I have one actually called Dirt in the Skirt, and it's by Pepper Pear Davis, who was an uncredited consultant on the film. And she has it's kind of in the last, I'll say 8 to 10 chapters. It's about 40 something chapters. It's a memoir. And she is one of the co-writers of the song that they use, the
Right.
victory song. And she was contacted by Penny Marshall after the documentary came out and said, I want to use I'm interested in this, in making this in a feature length, and I would like to buy the rights to use your song. And she sold it to her for $5,000.
Oh, geez.
But then they invited her to a cast and crew conference. And so she got to know the crew, and she brought her scrapbooks and she answered a lot of questions for them. And so a lot of the things she told them are parts that made it into the script, including getting telegrams to tell you that your loved one is either killed in action or missing in action.
And I want to talk about that scene specifically in a little bit. So
then come back and I'll tell you the rest of that one.
Okay.
Oh
yeah.
No, as she said, the line about there's no crying in a baseball. And that's
She's
where the
the one who
line
said
came
that.
from. So they asked her, how do you keep playing if you get a telegram like that says your brother is missing in action and you don't know where he is and it's been weeks? How do you not cry all the time? And she said there was no crying in our baseball. When you went to bed at night and you turned out the light, that's when you cried. And turns into they twisted that phrase and used it.
Yeah.
So to back up just a little bit, the song that Shelly is talking about that was co-written by what was her name again?
Pepper Davis.
Pepper.
Pepper Pear.
Yes. I would say Pepper Piper. Wait, Pepper. That was co-written by her. That's the song that you see Evelyn, the character Evelyn, writing during the show, the movie, and then all the women sing, and that was the song that was actually the actual anthem of the league. So a couple of the players wrote it, and then that was the anthem of the league. So just to for anybody who wasn't quite sure which song we're talking about, it's that one.
Well, since we brought it up and kind of talked about, that the scene with the telegram is it's a very powerful scene, especially when, and it shows Jimmy's change of heart, where, you could imagine that early on he would have just kicked the guy out and get out of here and come back when you get your head out of your posterior. But instead he took the telegram and found out who it was for. And he knew that. And of course, we can't have you all having all concerned about this throughout the game. We need to, get it settled. And really, he had concern for the women, and who was it? And so that was a very powerful scene there, especially being able, willing to let her cry on his shoulder, literally, So,
Right.
One other character I want to focus on. Absolutely want to focus on, just because Secrets of Stargate, Don S. Davis as the Racine coach, Charlie. And such a great character. He's such a great actor. He was such a great actor, sadly, has passed away, but such a great actor. And he plays that role so well. In my headcanon, General Hammond went back in time and became this character, this person instead. So, because time travel's in Stargate, so we could do that.
Yeah, there are some interesting, of course, we're talking about the big ones, Rosie O'Donnell and, Gina Davis and Tom Hanks. But then in some of the other players, there's also some interesting actresses there. We talked about, Evelyn, who wrote that song. We talked about Megan Kavanaugh as Marla Hooch, but Evelyn Gardner, who wrote in the movie, is the one who wrote the song. She's played by Bitty Schramm, who, if you are familiar with the show Monk, she plays Monk's assistant at the very beginning of that show. Oh, and now I'm blanking on what her name is, but anyways, Sharona, thank you. Yes.
Oh, there you go.
She plays Sharona there. And then Shirley Baker, the girl who can't read, that's Anne Cusack, John and Joan Cusack's sister. And then talking about the telegram scene, of course, that's Betty Spaghetti, who, and that's actually Tracy Reiner. That's actually Penny Marshall's daughter. There. So I know it's just kind of neat to see, you know, in these old movies when you go back and you're like, oh wow, look at all the other things, like who's there, and you know.
Well, then you had Gary Marshall, who was known from a lot of things. Well, that's Penny Marshall's brother,
right? Exactly.
And his niece or his daughter was in the show too, but I can't remember which character she played. She was on there too. And Biddy Schramm was the youngest one at 24. And she was actually a collegiate athlete. She played tennis in college. And I thought that was interesting. And for many of the actresses that you just mentioned, this was their launch. This got them into the business. I think it was Anne Ramsey. She played Helen Haley. And it's Dr. Haley now.
Right.
I knew her as Lisa on Mad About You. And she went straight from one to the other. So, and you know, there's Gina Davis and Lori Petty weren't the original cast for that role. Right. Lori Petty took a Kit, and it was supposed to be Moira Kelly coming right off of The Cutting Edge with D.B. Sweeney. But she injured her ankle and she could not participate. She couldn't do the physicality of the show. So they had to recast her with Lori Petty. And I'm guessing, Noelle, you know who was originally cast and spent over 3 months practicing with the team before she left instead of Gina Davis.
So, so there were actually two actresses who were cast before Gina Davis, and now I'm blanking, of course.
I forgot the first one, but the second one is Deborah Winger.
Yes. Deborah Winger, but she, who was it first? The first one left actually because Madonna was cast.
You know, they say Deborah Winger left because when Madonna was cast, she was worried it would become an Elvis movie, meaning all about the star and everything would be circular around her. But I also read that she left because of a disagreement about the contract, and maybe that was just kind of a cover story at first. So, but you're right. I can't think of who the second one was. I did read that she had stated that was the reason why she left at any rate. So, and then I thought there was somebody else who also was there, but then was injured, and so then they ended up with Gina Davis, who, you know, it's always when you read these things about this other person was cast before, and then but you're like, but Gina Davis is perfect for this character, right? You can't even imagine the other person taking on that role because Gina Davis does such a great job with it. Yeah, they really do make it their own. And Gina Davis, when I looked at it, I didn't realize she was 36. And she had just come off of making Thelma and Louise, which was about to hit the Oscars. But she didn't have any of the 3-month training, though. And so she was very... not rigid, but it didn't come as naturally to her. So it took longer for her to get used to they had to get her legs conditioned to be able to squat. She said she kept tipping over. And my daughter, who is a catcher, she was watching and goes, Mom, she doesn't look like a catcher. And my daughter's like, see right there, there's a body double. See how she blocked the ball? Gina Davis doesn't do that. That's a real catcher right there. Like, Brenna, you got to stop you.
She's laughing. Yeah.
Well, I will say that there are some editing quirks about the actual baseball scenes in this. Let's just put it that way. There's when they're doing the spring training scene, the tryouts, you know, they're in Wrigley Field, and then they show one of the girls, one of the women, in front of just a picket fence, you know, wooden picket outfield fence that you would absolutely not have seen in Wrigley Field at that time. Not to mention, of course, today, but it's just like things like that. Where where what I'm blanking here. Where Doris is sitting there during the World Series doing her little cheers or little, let's go from third base. You can tell they just literally pointed the camera at her, Rosie O'Donnell, and just told her to do cheers from the base. I mean, it was just, we need to fill in 30 seconds here, I guess. I don't know, but there are some weirdnesses in the editing of the actual games, but that's just nitpicky stuff more than anything else.
I did read that Penny Marshall had the girls just play and film them playing so that she would have B-roll footage to pull out and use if needed.
Yeah, that's kind of figured. So talk about just a couple of scenes, a couple of things going on. Because of course, the movie's based around one whole season. The first, supposedly the first season, as we said, it's actually kind of a amalgam of throughout the entire history of the women's pro league. But yeah, you get that scene from spring training where they're kind of showing up and they're all amazed at who can make it, and going through the whole routine and recognizing that, that these women who really can play, that this isn't just, made up. And it's interesting to see that development in the characters going into the season. Of course, they're going and they're playing, and there's a great scene with the kid, the boy, Stillwell Angel, where he's in the bus, he's running through and he puts his hand over the bus driver's eyes and he just, I quit, I'm gone.
That whole thing is so funny. Yeah. All of it. Cause then, they wake up Jimmy Dugan, what's going on? Why is the bus stopped? Lou quit. Who's Lou? The driver.
Right.
I think we do have to call out the their escort, the gal whose job it was to kind of keep an eye on them.
The chaperone,
because
right.
The chaperone. She was played so well. Darn it, I had it here and I lost the what was her name? I'm blanking on it now. Sorry, this was I had it written down and I lost it down. Miss Cuthbert. Pauline Brailsford was the name of the actress, but she was such a great character, even if she was supposed to be kind of the foil against the women who wanted to get out and see the world that they hadn't been able to.
I think she's played so well because she's at one time like kind of upholding the rules, but she never comes, at least to me, never came across as super rigid or as like single-mindedly looking at the rules and not the girls. Like she did come across as having somewhat motherly interest in the girls as well. At least that's the way her character came across to me. And so she's not a person that you are really like, I hate her, she's holding them back or anything like that. So
yeah, they didn't really develop her character well in the movie. No. I guess something has to give, right? But she stands out to be more like the house mother, the team mom, the one who always has, someone needs a hairpin. Oh, she's got that. You need a bandage. She's got that. And that they must have appreciated her, even though most of the scenes are about how to get away from her so we can go dance at the Suds bucket and smoke our cigarettes. Because when Jimmy does go off with the telegram and he starts to approach both Dottie and Betty, one of the girls, the first thing she does is she runs out the room to go get Miss Cuthbert. Yep. And when you see her come in and she takes her to comfort her and be there for her.
Although I do love that scene when you mentioned the bus scene, or you mentioned where, Jimmy's, and he turns after, first, he's passed out drunk and she wakes him up and he kisses her and then they both scream. And then he goes up to the front seat and turns around. I loved you in the Wizard of Oz.
Yeah.
It's got so many great one-liners in this movie. Yeah. I mean, and you say them all the time. It's just fantastic. I mean, this is
and then poor Miss Cuthbert here. She was like pleading with the driver who ran off, threw dirt in her face, and then she came back to try and get Jimmy to take care of the situation. He ends up by kissing her like that. Poor lady.
You felt sorry for her because she was kind of put upon quite a bit and abused a little bit, but she did have the best for the girls and the women at heart. So, and then, you had all these other little scenes that they did talk about the sneaking out to go to the Suds bucket, the roadhouse there to party and have a good time. And of course, Dottie's she's the homebody. She's going to stay home. But then when she finds out that, Lowenstein's is there and is coming to find him, she goes ahead of him to warn him and chase him out, and that get them out of there so they don't get in trouble and get kicked off the team, so you can tell she had the concern for the team as well.
And there's an Easter egg there at the Suds bucket. Mm-hmm. So Madonna's character, May, she's dancing. And and this is a real nice showcase of the actress. I'll use the actress for the actress's abilities and skill in this area. But she's dancing with a man who is from Laverne and Shirley. She's dancing with Eddie Mecca, who plays Carmine, the dance instructor in Laverne and Shirley.
Oh, that's funny.
Wow.
Right?
That's awesome.
And now when you go back, you're going to look at it differently if you have ever seen Laverne and Shirley and you know about Carmine. So
that's fun. That's great. That's a great little Easter egg.
A little Easter egg, yeah.
Yeah, that's it's nice when they do that too. They sneak things like that in there. And I have to admit, I always laughed at the Catholic church scenes, and even as a priest, I laughed at them.
Have you ever dropped your Bible twice during confession?
No.
Yeah.
No, I
like,
never
okay.
have. I like that. What did you tell him? Everything.
Everything.
Oh, the poor man's going to need, help.
Yeah.
He opens the door and he's like sweating. He's just staring and sweating.
I fortunately have never had a confession like that. And if I did, I wouldn't talk about it. But
I'd say my favorite church part, though, is the part where Jimmy Dugan comes in to get the girls. They're all praying. And I think one of them even has a rosary there, and he's like, okay, like God's heard you or something like that. And
God knows we have a game.
God knows we have a game. Like, come on. Right. And the girls are all leaving. And as Jimmy's like following after them, he turns around and he's like, he points at you infer he's pointing at the crucifix, like, you.
Well, and he does kind of
doesn't he do a little
half
weird
genuflection and kind of sort of sign of the cross when he does it. Yeah.
Right.
And then later he actually does pray in the not in the dugout, but in the where they prep
clubhouse.
Thank you.
Clubhouse before the World
sort of praise
World Series. Yeah.
And I can't repeat all of it here, but there's a part the first part we always used to quote. We used to joke about playing softball tournaments all over the country. Yep. Lord, hallowed be thy name. May our feet be swift. May our bats be mighty. May our balls be plentiful.
Yeah.
Lord, these are good girls. These are good girls.
Yeah.
So there's a quote for everything if you play ball. Lay off the high ones. I like the high ones. Mule, nah. And it's their little sister banter, and my girls do that even to, when they played at the same time, they would call that out to each other. So it was cute.
I do have to talk about the controversy of this movie. The World Series final game counts down, of course, to Dottie versus Kit. And you see Dottie she's catching and she's lined up in front of home plate and Kit runs into her. Here's the question. Did she drop on purpose?
Mm-hmm.
And the actress says she'll never tell.
Yep. And it's filmed in such a way that you could be that it rolled out of her hand, or it could be she purposely allowed it to roll out of her hand.
And you can argue
what say you two?
Often. I say no. I say that she was actually knocked down and the ball rolled out of her hand.
Okay. Noëlle?
I agree. And I think that Dottie, as much as she would, well, first of all, when she talked about to Kit, when Kit was yelling at her and she finally was like, you got yourself here, but also you're blaming me for everything. I think she knew the importance of her sister earning things for herself. And I also don't think that she would have allowed Kit to win at the expense of the rest of her team. It just doesn't seem in character for her at all. So I agree with Shelly. No.
Yep. For the exact same reason, because she's already shown you both that she will sacrifice for her sister, but also that when it comes to the game and it comes to her loyalty to her teammates, that comes first. The minute she walks up and she tells him, "Hi, balls," she can't hit him. She can't lay off him.
Mhm.
I mean, she was going to have her strike out and go sit down.
Right. I have to admit that this ending is a little, I mean, probably a lot of people feel this way. It's bittersweet. I think it's the right ending, but it's sort of frustrating to me that in the end, the team you've been watching the whole time doesn't win. And
Right.
Kit, who rather annoys me through much of the movie, that she's the one who ends up by winning. No, going back to history, historically, it is accurate that the Racing Bells did win the first championship of the women's league. Though they did not play the Rockford Peaches.
Right. Actually, if you look at their record, the Rockford Peaches had the worst record of the first season.
But overall, the course of the league, they won the most championships.
Yeah, they're one of the two teams that went through the entire course of the league. Them in South Bend. So, although I generally agree with you that no, she was not going to let that happen. Just for the sake of presenting the counter argument, I'm going to, I'll say that yes, she did it on purpose because she wanted Kit to have her moment where she bested her sister. But I really can't take that too seriously as an argument either. I tried to come up with serious arguments for it, and I really can't, because she was such a good player, and she was, as much as she was kind of a reluctant player, when she played her heart out. She played it for all.
She was a ball player.
And she was a ball player, and she had, again, a couple of times you see her do that where she could just grab the ball, and someone throws a ball and she just grabs it, and there wasn't even a bobble to it. And for something like this, she would have had, as a good catcher knows, you don't just have the ball in your hand. You had the ball in the mitt and you tag with the mitt, and she would have done that, and that would have been a solid grab.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's not like the ball got there, not like you see where you have the instant replay where the ball gets there at the same time as the runner, and they can show you down to a pixel of where that ball is. That ball was there with enough time for her to make the tag and make it a solid one, even if she got hit. So I agree. The minute
she has the ball in her glove, it's not obstruction, and the runner has the right to just plow right through her.
Yep.
So.
They've surprisingly, in MLB, they've changed that a little bit now too.
We're not going to talk about those changes.
Yeah.
Like the new stuff.
No. This is the one thing though that part of what irks me, I think, about the ending in that way is that fact that Dottie was such a good player, and you see her taking that hit and not dropping the ball in the montages that they show of the baseball sequences. So for that to be the case, that in the end she does drop the ball, even though I don't think that it was, it really bothers me.
Yeah.
They put it together beautifully to make you think, did she or didn't she? It's that great question, kind of like in Field of Dreams when he goes out through the cornfield. What's past there? But,
what's out there?
Right.
But there's only
exactly so.
There's one part of this movie that it doesn't ring right. And I know why they did it. They did it to heighten the drama, but it doesn't ring true. And that is that she left with Bob. Dottie leaves. Her husband shows up, and she and he leave at the beginning of a World Series. And that doesn't ring true to her character. You could argue that one maybe, but it could go either way.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, she would have seen it through. We were only talking about 7 games, a week, week and a half.
And her husband was with her. So there's that. And he's alive and he's home. But they start driving off. We got as far as Yellowstone. And
that's halfway across the country.
And turned around. I mean, anyway, it made for a cute moment when he's telling Alice, look, if she doesn't have anything, you got to tell me right away. And, do you hear me? And she pulls off the mask. Yeah, I hear you. And it's Dottie. But no, there's just something about it.
Right. I think that's kind of what I was referring to. I mean, Jimmy comes over and talks to her before she leaves. Like, you're going to regret this. If you don't see it out, you're going to regret this. And I mean, I think it's true. Not, you know, in his thing about like, you are a ball player, and like, you're going to regret not seeing it through. But also the point about letting down her teammates, which to me just, again, doesn't ring true to her character, that she would just be like, oh, I'm just going to walk out on my teammates like that. Like, that's not who Dottie is. So I agree that is.
But it did let the writers give Tom Hanks a really awesome line after that, when she just says it's just too hard, and he says it's supposed to be hard. If it wasn't hard, everyone would do it. The hard is what makes it great. And that's another quote we use in our house a lot, which is, it's just too hard. Bah, it's supposed to be hard.
Yeah,
you know?
That's life.
Yeah,
I use that on my students, my children. They're like, it's too hard to bow tie. I'm like, well.
But then this is also Dottie putting it into perspective. She keeps telling him it's just a game, and he's like, no, it's life. It's a way of life. She's like, it's just a game. As wonderful and amazing as I like it, I want to go on with my life with my husband. I just think they put it in the wrong spot. But then, I'll bet they sat there and, how do we do this? How do we write this?
Right.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. So anything else either you want to talk about as we finish up?
Yeah. So there is one little scene. It's just this little thing that happens. And it's when, again, knowing that, Branch Rickey was one of the original owners of the league, who integrated the women's professional league, like the men's league, was not integrated. And there was no formal policy about that, but the scouts didn't go out and bring any, people of color into the tryouts at all. And there's this one little scene in the movie where there is a group of Black ladies who are next to where they're practicing, and the one lady, just picks up the ball and throws it. When Dottie, catches it and was like, wow. And it's a neat, like, there's nothing else about that. It's just that one thing, but I thought, a nice way of acknowledging that there were other women who also were able to, or could have contributed as well, and acknowledging their talent. So, obviously there were certain times, but like I said, the man who integrated baseball was one of the owners. So, it wasn't the time quite yet, but it was moving in that direction.
And it is interesting that they didn't integrate in the last couple of years of the women's league, because Jackie Robinson was 1947 or 48. It was right after World War II, and so there would have been a little bit of overlap.
Was it in the 40s? I couldn't remember if it was 40s or if it was in early 50s.
I thought it was early 50s, but I might be wrong.
So.
Look it up here real quick. That's what we got Google for, right?
Right.
But you said the women's league went to 1954. You're
right. 1947 is when he started. For some reason, I thought it was into the early 50s. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. So, but I agree with you, Noëlle. I think that's the most. It's just a really beautiful nod. Yeah, just not making a big statement, but setting it there so we recognize it.
Right. Exactly.
Well, excellent. And we'd like to take a moment now to thank our patrons who make it possible for us to create the secrets of movies and TV, including Jason S., Lizzie G., Father Leo H., Derek B., and John N. Their generous donations at sqpn.com/give make it possible for us to continue all the shows at StarQuest. You can join them by visiting sqpn.com/give. Be sure to follow the Secrets of Movies and TV on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or other great podcast apps. We're also on YouTube at youtube.com/StarQuestMedia. If you've enjoyed this discussion, please share it with your friends and help us grow our audience. To find other discussions of movies and TV shows and to send feedback, please visit sqpn.com/secrets. Our email for feedback is secrets@sqpn.com. Follow StarQuest on social media at facebook.com/StarQuestMedia or on Twitter @SQPN. You can also join in the discussion on our Discord at sqpn.com/Discord. So let us know what you think of this episode of Secrets of Movie and TVs or other episodes of movies and TVs that we've had. As we close, Shelly Kelly, thank you for joining me in sharing the secrets of A League of Their Own.
Thank you.
And Noëlle Crowe, thank you as well.
Thank you. It's been fun. And can I add one thing? I remembered who the other person was who was in line to play Dottie. It was Demi Moore.
Oh, that's right.
Really?
She got pregnant.
Oh, wow.
Yes.
Oh,
Demi Moore
cool.
as well. Right. I was like, I need to fill that in because it was.
That's great.
So, but yeah, it's been really fun talking about a great movie.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely. And once again, I'm Father Cory Sticha. Thank you for listening to the Secrets of League of Their Own on StarQuest. And you know I got to throw this line in. There's no crying in podcasting.
Here's another show on the StarQuest Network you're sure to enjoy. Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World. Find the show wherever fine podcasts are found or at sqpn.com/mysterious.